Welcome to the second public information meeting for the Grand Gateway Grade Separation Study. We look forward to sharing with you the project details, alternatives being considered, and the alternatives evaluation process. Engaging and soliciting feedback from the community will help ensure that the analysis and subsequent recommendations correspond to local conditions and solutions. Thank you for sharing with us your feedback on the project. Once the presentation is complete, we invite you to the gymnasium to review exhibits and discuss the project with the project team. This presentation will continue to replay for the remainder of the open house if you wish to see it again. Again, thank you for your time. We look forward to sharing the information on the Grand Gateway Grade Separation Study. The agenda for the presentation is a project overview, schedule of the project, an overview of Public Information Meeting Number 1, an overview of the Community Advisory Group meetings, alternatives analysis, criteria for evaluation, and next steps. We are going to provide a brief project overview before presenting new information. The stakeholders working on this project are comprised of representatives from the design team, as well as local agencies and municipalities, Chamber of Commerce, local institutions, park and environmental organizations, and transit agencies. The team that is working on this project includes staff from the Village of Elmwood Park, the Illinois Department of Transportation, Cook County, Metro Strategies Group, Knight Engineers and Architects, ESI Consultants, GSG Consultants, and Altus Works. We have also listed our Community Advisory Group, or CAG members, including the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, Christopher Burke Engineering, Leiden Township, Franklin Park, River Grove, the Federal Transit Administration, the Illinois Commerce Commission, the North Central Council of Mayors, PACE, the Regional Transit Authority, the Grand Avenue Chamber of Commerce, the Federal Highway Administration, the Canadian Pacific Railway, and Metra. The project study area is shown in orange. Grand Avenue at the Metra Canadian Pacific Railway crossing is located 0.6 miles west of Illinois Route 43, or Harlem Avenue, in the village of Elmwood Park. The approximate study limits extend from 78th Court to 75th Court along Grand Avenue, a length of approximately a half of a mile. Overall limits may be expanded as required for traffic management and construction staging, drainage and associated routing and connections, and horizontal and vertical railroad alignments, both permanent and temporary. The project objective is to develop a preferred alternative that accommodates and improves roadway traffic and rail operations, safety, travel efficiency, reliability, and regional mobility. A grade separation would improve safety and regional mobility for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists through the Grand Avenue crossing and associated corridor. In addition to improving public safety, this project has several local and regional benefits. The grade separation would reduce vehicular traffic congestion and delays and facilitate a more efficient emergency response from both the fire and police departments. A grade separation would eliminate conflicts and delay between vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, and trains. Reliability would also be increased. Any impacts to environmental resources, properties, and land use would also be quantified. In the event that an alternative would cause an existing property's access to be impacted or eliminated, alternate access options would be identified, evaluated, and quantified. We are more than halfway through this study. Following the public input received from this meeting, we plan to engage the public again through the fourth and final Community Advisory Group meeting. Once a preferred alternative has been determined, we will proceed to a public hearing so that the team can make any final changes before submitting for design approval, anticipated to occur in 2023. Transportation projects follow a distinct process for studying, designing, contract preparation, and construction. Public engagement and involvement occurs during all phases. For this project, upon completion of the second CAG meeting, the first public information meeting was held in April of 2021. The meeting was held virtually due to COVID restrictions, and 100 people participated via Zoom. Information about the study was presented to the public, including the draft problem statement and purpose and need for the project. Virtual breakout rooms were used to facilitate discussion and allow for questions and answers. The purpose of the project is to alleviate existing congestion and improve safety and mobility to all transportation users at the Grand Avenue and Metro Canadian Pacific Railway crossing. In order to perform an initial evaluation of each alternative, the project team utilizes a screening process. In summary, this process focuses on the following elements: the safety and overall transportation benefits of the alternative, an assessment of impacts to the environment, future land use, overall property displacements, and property impacts, including access and parking impacts, construction duration, and associated disruption during construction, such as adverse travel times, impacts to community cohesion, and overall construction cost. In order for an alternative to be advanced for additional consideration, it must satisfy the requirements of the project purpose and need. To reiterate, the project need is defined as the 10-degree crossing askew angle results in an unconventionally long crossing, which requires vehicles an above average amount of time to traverse the crossing. The unsafe existing crossing condition causes vehicles to be potentially trapped on the railroad crossing. The Federal Railroad Administration 2020 Accident Prediction Report ranks this crossing as the sixth most likely to have a collision out of 7,920 crossings in the state of Illinois. In 2005, the National Transportation Safety Board recommended that a grade separation be constructed at the Grand Avenue grade crossing. The current and future demands of vehicular, railway, and pedestrian traffic dictate the need to address existing deficiencies. Current peak travel times on Grand Avenue and the surrounding roadway network result in a high level of congestion within this area. The project purpose is to alleviate congestion and mobility to roadway, vehicular, pedestrian, and bicyclist transportation users at the Grand Avenue and Metro Canadian Pacific Railway crossing, while eliminating roadway and train conflicts. 3 of the 4 Community Advisory Group meetings slated for this project have been completed. The first CAG meeting was held on July 23, 2020. This meeting focused on goals and guidelines, the project overview, timeline, and the purpose and need. The second CAG meeting was held on February 18, 2021. This meeting delved into drafting a problem statement, the purpose and need statement, and developing criteria for the alternative analysis. These elements were presented in draft form at the first public information meeting. The third CAG meeting took place on December 7, 2021. This meeting involved the review of the 6 alternatives, alternative comparisons, and the evaluation criteria weight of importance. All of the information discussed at the third CAG meeting will be shared today during this public information meeting. To understand the project better, let's talk through some background data. Existing average daily traffic along Grand Avenue within the project area ranges from approximately 20,000 to 21,100 vehicles per day. The weekday morning and evening peak hours for the study area were determined to occur from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. and from 4:45 p.m. to 5:45 p.m. During the morning peak hour, the primary direction of travel is westbound, and during the evening peak hour, the primary direction of travel is eastbound. Average daily traffic for the design year of 2050 is projected to range from approximately 21,500 to 24,300 vehicles per day, an increase of approximately 15%. Crash analysis along Grand Avenue was performed using crash data and collision diagrams provided by IDOT within the study limits during the 5-year study period from 2016 to 2020. Police reports from local law enforcement agencies were also referenced to verify the crash data. This bar chart shows all crash data at the intersections along Grand Avenue from 79th Avenue to west of 75th Court. The highest number of crashes occurred at the intersection of Grand Avenue and 78th Avenue. The next highest number of crashes occurred at the railroad crossing. In a 2007 study of crashes in the area, a total of 45 crashes were reported at the Grand Avenue Railroad crossing since 1956. Of these 45 crashes, 35 crashes, or 78%, involved a train hitting a vehicle. 4 crashes, or 9%, involved a vehicle hitting a train, and the remaining 6 crashes, or 13%, involved a pedestrian. There have been a total of 8 fatalities and 27 injuries. This pie chart illustrates the type of accidents that occurred between 2016 and 2020. The majority of accidents were due to rear-end crashes, turning crashes, and side swipe crashes. The majority of crashes which occurred at the intersection of Grand Avenue and the railroad crossing were rear-end crashes. An alternatives evaluation report was submitted to IDOT in October of 2021. This report summarized the 6 alternatives that were developed, along with their associated impacts. All 6 of the alternatives propose a grade separation to satisfy the purpose and need. Each alternative is designed in accordance with the policies put forth by the IDOT's Bureau of Design and Environment. In addition to these 6 alternatives, a no-build alternative was considered, which maintains the current conditions in the study area. The no-build alternative does not improve safety or alleviate congestion, and therefore does not satisfy the purpose and need. The following descriptions summarize the 6 alternatives. Ultimately, one of these alternatives will be chosen as the final preferred alternative. Alternative number 1 raises Grand Avenue approximately 30 feet over the existing railroad. Consequently, 76th Avenue is raised approximately 17 feet to meet the proposed Grand Avenue profile. A 3-sided concrete tunnel would be constructed to accommodate all 3 railroad tracks. The cross-section for each of the 6 alternatives includes 2 12-foot travel lanes in each direction and a 7-foot sidewalk on the south side of the roadway, as well as a 10-foot wide shared use path on the north side of the roadway. Each alternative also includes a 12-foot median, although alternative number 1 is the only alternative that has a flush median. The remainder of the alternatives include a raised median. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. Due to the raising of the railroad profile in alternative number 1, access from Grand Avenue would be removed at 78th Avenue and 77th Court. The rear access to the Elmwood Park Fire Station and the public library would also be removed. The spur off of 76th Avenue would also be removed. Exiting Grand Avenue access for the Pace bus stop and Metro station pickup and drop-off area would be eliminated. 10 commercial properties and 2 residential properties along Grand Avenue would be displaced. As shown here and on the exhibits in the gymnasium, an X denotes a property displacement, an A denotes a property access impact, and an R denotes the roadway access impact. Both on-street parking spaces and parking spaces behind the Elmwood Park Public Library and Fire Station would be impacted by the grade separation. A total of 47 spaces are estimated to be removed. Alternative number 2 lowers Grand Avenue approximately 35 feet under the existing railroad. Consequently, 76th Avenue is lowered approximately 5 feet to meet the proposed Grand Avenue profile. 2 staggered single-span bridges with a pier in the median would carry the railroad over Grand Avenue. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. The Elmwood Park Metro Station would be reconstructed due to the implementation of temporary tracks during construction. Due to the lowering of the roadway profile in alternative number 2, Grand Avenue access would be eliminated at 77th Court. The rear access to the Elmwood Park Fire Station and Public Library would also be eliminated. The spur off of 76th Avenue would also be removed. Existing Grand Avenue access for the Pace bus stop and Metro station pickup and drop-off area would be eliminated. 5 commercial properties and 1 residential property along Grand Avenue would be displaced. Both on-street parking spaces and parking spaces behind the Elmwood Park Public Library and Fire Station would be impacted by the grade separation. A total of 47 spaces are estimated to be removed. Alternative number 3 lowers Grand Avenue approximately 13 feet and raises the railroad approximately 13 feet. The existing 76th Avenue profile would be maintained. 2 staggered single-span bridges with a pier in the median would carry the railroad over Grand Avenue. The Elmwood Park Metro Station would be reconstructed in conjunction with the raising of the railroad profile. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. Due to the raised railroad profile, the railroad crossings at 75th Avenue and 73rd Avenue would require modifications. Due to the profile adjustments in alternative number 3, access from Grand Avenue would be eliminated from 77th Court. The rear access to the Elmwood Park Fire Station and Public Library would also be eliminated. The Metro Station pickup and drop-off area would temporarily lose access to Grand Avenue during construction. That access would be restored upon completion of the project. 3 commercial properties and 1 residential property along Grand Avenue would be displaced. Both on-street parking spaces and parking spaces behind the Elmwood Park Public Library and Fire Station would be impacted by the grade separation. A total of 21 spaces are estimated to be removed. Noise and visual impacts are anticipated due to the raised railroad profile. 75th and 73rd Avenue will also require profile adjustments to accommodate the raised railroad profile. This will incur added cost and traffic delays during construction, along with making the 75th Avenue Railroad crossing more unsafe. Alternative number 4 would maintain the existing Grand Avenue profile and raise the railroad approximately 20 feet. The existing 76th Avenue profile would be maintained. 2 staggered single-span bridges with a pier in the median would carry the railroad over Grand Avenue. The Elmwood Park Metro Station would be reconstructed in conjunction with the raising of the railroad profile. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. Due to the raised railroad profile, the railroad crossings at 75th Avenue and 73rd Avenue would require modifications. In alternative number 4, there is no roadway profile adjustment. All access points from Grand Avenue would be maintained. 1 residential property along Grand Avenue would be displaced. Since the railroad profile is raised approximately 20 feet, another grade-separated railroad bridge must be introduced at the 75th Avenue Railroad crossing. This would result in added cost, constructability issues, and traffic delays during construction. The raised railroad would also bisect the community. This would create negative impacts to noise levels, visual aesthetics, and community cohesion. Alternative number 5 would maintain the existing Grand Avenue profile and lower the railroad approximately 30 feet. The existing 76th Avenue profile would be maintained. A 3-sided concrete tunnel would be constructed to accommodate all 3 railroad tracks. The Elmwood Park Metro Station would be reconstructed in conjunction with the lowering of the railroad profile. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. Due to the lowered railroad profile, the railroad crossing at 75th Avenue, 73rd Avenue, and Harlem Avenue would require modifications. In alternative number 5, there is no roadway profile adjustment. All access points from Grand Avenue would be maintained. At least 5 commercial properties and 21 residential properties along Grand Avenue would be displaced by this design due to extensive grading. On-street parking spaces would be impacted by the grade separation. A total of 25 spaces are estimated to be removed. The length of the impacts for lowering the railroad profile extend beyond the scope of the project study area. 3 additional grade separations are needed to achieve this design. New railroad bridges must be constructed at 75th, 73rd, and Harlem Avenue. This would incur massive extra costs, traffic delays, and constructability issues. Alternative number 6 would raise Grand Avenue approximately 19 feet and lower the railroad approximately 11 feet. Consequently, 76th Avenue would be raised approximately 10 feet to meet the proposed Grand Avenue profile. A 3-sided concrete tunnel would be constructed to accommodate all 3 railroad tracks. The Elmwood Park Metro Station would be reconstructed in conjunction with the lowering of the railroad profile. Canadian Pacific Railway and Metro operations and services would be maintained during construction. Due to the lowered railroad profile, the railroad crossing at 75th Avenue and 73rd Avenue would require modifications. Due to the profile adjustments in alternative number 6, access from Grand Avenue would be eliminated from 77th Court. The rear access to Elmwood Park Fire Station and the Public Library would also be eliminated. The spur off 76th Avenue would also be removed. Existing Grand Avenue access for the Pace bus stop and Metro Station pickup and drop-off area would be eliminated. 3 commercial properties and 1 residential property along Grand Avenue would be displaced by this design. Both on-street parking spaces and parking spaces behind the Elmwood Park Public Library and Fire Station would be impacted by the grade separation. A total of 44 spaces are estimated to be removed. This table summarizes the construction costs and significant impacts associated with the 6 alternatives. The cost of construction ranges from $96 million to $583 million. Total displacements, both residential and commercial, range from 1 to more than 26. The total area of right-of-way acquisition required ranges from approximately 8,000 square feet to 650,000 square feet. Existing access impacts varies from 0 to 12. Now let's talk about next steps for the project going forward. Following this meeting, the 4th Community Advisory Group meeting will be held to review the comments received from the public. These comments will help the team refine the alternatives and determine a preferred alternative. That alternative will be presented at a public hearing in 2023. During the public hearing, residents can provide comments on the record regarding the alternative. The team will then present the study and preferred alternative to IDOT for design approval. Once approval is received, the village will work to advance the project into the next stage of design and will continue to work to secure funding assistance for construction. If you would like to comment on the alternatives or other aspects of the public information meeting or project, please note that comments will be accepted for this public information meeting until June 7th, 2022. You are invited to review the exhibits in the gymnasium and ask questions. Project team members are located throughout the area and comment forms are available if you'd like to leave written comments. Thank you for your continued involvement in this project. As a reminder, we will be accepting comments until June 7th, 2022. Comments can be submitted through the project website at www.grandgatewayep.com or via email at info@grandgatewayep.com. Comments can also be mailed to 1901 Butterfield Road, Suite 260 in Downers Grove, Illinois. Thank you for your feedback. We appreciate your participation.